Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Primal Scream album, More Light. These guys are a Glasgow rock band. They've been releasing material since the late 80s, late mid-80s, and this new record of theirs is another addition to their ever-growing discography, in which there are a few major highlights like Screamadelica in 91, Exterminator in 2000, and this band's career has really been defined by almost always being in some sort of state of flux. Primal Scream's albums can be mixed bags from time to time, but their best and some of their longest releases are undeniably cohesive. And for sure, this new album of theirs, More Light, is one of their more cohesive ones as of late. I think it's one of their better records as of late. It's one of their longer ones too, if not their longest album, period. And Primal Scream's records that break that 60-minute mark do tend to be some of their better ones. Now, for one, the band is getting back to their more psychedelic side, the more psychedelic side of their sound, with numerous songs on here being really thick, noisy, heavy with instrumentation, very repetitive with riffs that are just grooved out to the point of being a little hypnotic. And I think this is one of their more consistent records too, with how much the band sticks to some of these more psychedelic and just trippy sounds. This LP is just overwhelming with sound and momentum and rock and roll swagger, and it can be pretty impressive instrumentally as well, bringing together rock instrumentation, blending it with strings, with horns. Of course, this is not the only vibe that the band channels on this record. You've got the buzzing walls of guitar and the blaring sax riffs on the opening track 2013. You've got acoustics on here, backed with some sitar. Hard distorted riffs against some very sharp drum beats. The song Hit Void brings a really shoegazy vibe to these very just wavy, warped guitars. There are tracks on here that feature some very strange bouncy echoes, and the closer on here features Bobby Gillespie singing over what feels like some kind of long-lost gospel chorus-backed Rolling Stones instrumental. It's a little hokey, but it is fun. It's a really big change of pace from the urgent opening track on this LP that talks about just the media, propaganda, rock and roll. The only other track that sticks out to me as not being incredibly psychedelic, but still is another favorite of mine on this thing, is the track Invisible City, with its very just hard grooving bass line that to me feels like the band is really getting back to their more alternative dance side. Of course, there are some very peppy horns throughout this track too, and it's got one of the sharper choruses on this thing. Even though it is short, it's very catchy. Invisible City. If there is one thing though that I didn't really care for throughout this LP, it did get a little old to me. It is Bobby's vocals at times. There are moments when I wish he was as passionate as he was on the closer. The sort of breathy approach that he makes to a lot of the songs on this album can get a little stale and makes these songs feel samey at times. The only other issue that I have is that some of these songs with this album being very long can feel overly long. Elimination Blues, Tenement Kid. I think the vocal melodies on these tracks are a little too repetitive, as are the lyrics. They feel a little too surface level for me. The track Goodbye Johnny 2 suffers from this issue, and on top of it, just the vocal delivery and the lyrics feels a little corny. Compare this track, this slower track, with another slow track on here, Walking with the Beast, which is very pretty, beautiful guitar melody on this track. It's a little Velvet Underground-esque, and to me, one of the more moving songs on this album. I can really tell lyrically Bobby Gillespie is struggling with something in what he is saying, and at least what he is putting down into words. Yeah, he's breathy again on this track, but with what he is saying, it feels like a very personally painful track. Overall, I did think a few of the tracks on this LP were underwhelming, sure, but for an album this long, there was never a point at which I was sitting there and I really felt like I wanted it to end. I was always in a position where I was just waiting for what the band was going to throw at me next. And in retrospect, even though an album like that can get kind of old, because once you learn its intricacies, it's, you know them, it's whatever, it's not a surprise anymore. I still ended up pretty pleased with how this LP came out and what my listening experience with it was. This record is not one of my favorites of this year, but I do think it is possibly the best the band has put out since Exterminator. So do take that into account. If you've given this LP a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? why, what do you think I should review next, and that's it. Anthony Fantano, Primal Scream, more light, forever.